Welcome, friends of the Greasy Shop Rag. Today we're going to take a look at a Husqvarna 136 chainsaw. Customer complaint is that it just doesn't want to start and run decent. Now the customer already knows there's something going on with this saw because attached to the saw in a baggie is the fuel filter. So we're going to look in there and we see an empty tank with just a fuel hose hanging down in there. And there's the customer supplied new fuel filter, actually. Although it looks like he's got a bunch of schmutz on it. So we're going to get this top cover off of here and start digging in a little bit. We want to make sure that the cylinder is not scored before we move forward with this repair. Because it sure would be a bummer to go through a carb rebuild and later find out that the cylinder was scored. So I always make it a habit to inspect that before I do any repair, any running issue repairs, or any expensive repairs. So we're going to dig right into getting into the carburetor. First we remove the air filter. There's just two screws, slotted screwdriver, pull the air filter off on this model. And then we got two 10mm nuts that hold the air box base plate to the carburetor. And our throttle linkage, that comes off as well. Now these bolts that hold the carburetor on pass through a support plate. That support plate is screwed down with two Phillips head screws. And those just go into the orange base there below the carburetor, top of the crankcase cover, whatever you want to call it. So we'll get these two studs yanked out of here. The tool that I chose to use, this 7mm swivel, a little bulky for the job, and it kind of got jammed up in there. Alright, we got our carburetor off. Now we're trying to get our fuel line off of there. It's an old fuel line. Don't want to come off, so we'll cut it with a razor blade. We already know that it's getting replaced, so no big deal. Out it comes. Alright, what do you think we're going to find inside this carburetor? We'll remove the pump cover and the pump diaphragm. That's a lot of schmutz, hey. That is, I'm not saying it's the worst. I'm just saying that's a lot of schmutz, alright? And that's our problem. That's our whole problem. I don't think anything got through the micro screen. We're not going to run this through the ultrasonic cleaner. You know, I see this kind of stuff all the time, and usually we just put a new pump diaphragm and metering diaphragm in here, and we're good to go. You'll be able to see here that this pump diaphragm is actually pretty stiff. So we're going to get it put back together. One thing you got to be careful about when doing this is that you don't get any macadamia nuts in your carb rebuild. They tend to get jammed up under the metering lever and prevent the fuel flow. So if you could avoid eating over the top of your carb rebuild and getting crumbs in there, that would be bonus, hey. Yeah. One option I found is to eat the cookie really fast. Big bites. Alright, where are we? We're putting the new gaskets in. This is the metering chamber base gasket and the metering diaphragm. I don't think I showed measuring the metering lever height on this, but that would be an important step. On this particular saw, I don't see any reason why things need to change a whole lot, or that things did change. It just had a rotten fuel line and dirt got in there, right? And we'll confirm that at the end, see if this thing starts and runs. So we got our cover screwed on there. We'll get it tightened down. Alright, the next step is to take another bite of your mid-morning snack. And then we're going to want to put the pump diaphragm on. Not that one. And we'll use that gasket. And that one. We'll put that one on there. Again, keep the crumbs out of the rebuild. You learn to do this stuff one-handed if you're going to eat while you're doing it. Alright, pump cover gets bolted down. One screw holds these on. So the factory hole that the fuel line passes through is pretty small. They use a small fuel line. And I've been in the habit of putting the next size bigger line on these. The filter fits better. I don't have to stretch the fuel line so hard to get it over the fitting on the carburetor or the filter itself. And I haven't had any problems doing it that way. So I'm going to probably continue to do it that way. We'll grab the end of the fuel line, pull it through the tank, and get our filter pushed on there. Now when you're deciding how much line to pull out here, you want the filter to lay flat on the bottom of the tank. That usually works best. Okay, now we're going the other direction. We're putting everything back together. Dust boot goes on the adjusting screws of the carburetor. Fuel line, you got to be careful with this fuel line where you route it on here. You want to keep it out of the throttle linkage, and you don't want it pinched. I've made the mistake in the past of screwing the carburetor down and actually pinching the fuel line and not getting any fuel flow. So pay attention to what you're doing there. I'm also in the habit of using Loctite on these. Alright, we got our fuel line pushed on. And now we're going to put the screws into the support plate. Don't forget to pick up the ground wire that comes from the kill switch. Actually, I don't think the ground wire comes from the kill switch. I think it comes from another part of the engine block, and the kill switch also is touching the plate. I always use Loctite on these two nuts because if you look at this, if one of them nuts came loose, it has free access to get into the carburetor. Now, I don't think it would pass all the way through the carburetor and make it into the engine. It could, but you don't want it, holding the throttle open or something like that or whatever. So I always put some Loctite on there. Do a little function check, make sure that the high speed and the kickdown work. And then we're going to fuel this thing up and give it a test run. Now during this test run, you'll see that It doesn't want to stay running on its own on the bottom end. And we're gonna find that point on the low-speed jet where you lean it out until it's running fast. If you're turning the screw in and it starts running faster, you know you're leaning it out. And then we're going to stay on the rich side of that point. So that's all I got for you on the Husky 136 carb rebuild. Thanks for watching. Later.